Well, thank you, Amit, for inviting me to do this, and you're all very welcome here, and it's great to see a very nice turnout this evening. It's always a great pleasure to introduce a volume of poems by one's former student, and it's a particular pleasure in this case to launch this new volume of poetry and prose by Amit Mediratta, who, as most of you know, is a graduate of English and philosophy here at NUI Galway and is currently working on an MA thesis in philosophy on the subject of Nietzsche. And, you know, in terms of this book, as with Amit's other publications, it's actually a lovely artifact to begin with, a lovely object. And, you know, even before you read what's inside, I think there's some pleasure to be gained just from holding it in your hand. And the book, I suppose, is itself a kind of illustration of that sort of care and attention to the visual and to the tactile that characterizes Amit's work and has characterized a lot of his work in the past, and not just in terms of his writing, but in terms of photography and dance as well. And as we know, Amit is really very much an all-rounder. This particular volume is entitled New York City, Fragments and Aphorisms. And if the title sounds a little like a 19th century philosophical work, that's no surprise, given Amit's background and interest. But the poems and prose here constantly point towards the philosophical, the world of ideas and ideals, while at the same time they're firmly grounded in what might be called the profane, the physical, sometimes even the grotesque. One of the things that gives this collection, though, its unity, is the recurring references to the characters of Goldman and Narcissus from the novel by Hermann Hesse. Goldman, who is the earthy wanderer through pleasures and pain, the pleasures and pain of sensual experience particularly. And on the other hand, Narcissus, the philosopher, the intellectual, the idealist, who is his alter ego. And Amit's work gives his own take on that polarity represented by Goldman and Narcissus, polarity between artist and philosopher, masculine, feminine, arrogance and humility, all of these things. And what's, I think, remarkable about this book and what gives it a great coherence is the sort of working through that general structure, that general theme in various ways, right the way through the collection. And the thing about the way that Amit does this is that just as you get sometimes almost uncomfortably close to one side of that polarity, you suddenly get steered off towards the other, so you're always in movement. And for example, I've just chosen, you know, a few lines here. Amit, I'm sure will read or give you a better flavor of the entirety of the book or a more extensive quotation. But just in a few stanzas, for instance, you can find yourself moving from the voice of the poet, which can sometimes be full of breathtaking ambition, as in these lines. I move from Bushwick to the Bronx, from Harlem to Midtown, in search of my iconic end, and supreme ideality in which Andy Warhol's shadow and my existence become one. You can move from that voice to a voice which is much more marked by humility and doubt. For instance, a few stanzas on from the lines I've just quoted, I'm just a young boy from the west of Ireland who listens to Chopin by night and dances naked to invisible music, who puts pen to paper one lonely day. Here I am on stage, sad as a clown for all to see. So that kind of movement is what's, I think, very interesting and remarkable and very engaging about this volume. But as well as recording a personal and philosophical quest, as this volume does, it's also an attempt to describe the experience of living in New York. And poets have different ways of trying to capture that amazing entity that is New York City. Allen Ginsberg, for instance, makes New York a surreal, intense scene of physical degradation and psychic exhilaration, on the other hand. But then, an equally great poet like Frank O'Hara adopts a much more low-key but equally compelling approach to New York by simply mapping the fascinating materiality of that city, the street numbers, the subway lines, the bars, the random encounters that you have on the streets of New York. And Amit, I think, interestingly, does a bit of both of those things. There's both that sort of sense of intense experience, but also kind of delight in just the presence of New York and its randomness and the kind of pleasure that can come from that. In Amit's New York, in other words, is a place both of joy and fulfillment, sometimes but also a place of occasionally alienation and yearning. But in any case, this is an ambitious, very well crafted and confident volume that adds up to what I think is a real achievement. So I'd just like to congratulate Amit on this volume and urge you all to get your own copy, and also to thank you for asking me to launch this. Well done, Amit.